Welcome to the Scaling Creative Podcast. Today's topic is when it's right to be wrong and when to admit it. But first, it's been a little while, guys.
It has.
So,
It's been a whole week.
Yeah, it's been a whole week.
It's been a whole week and for the podcast listeners.
Yeah,
For the
true.
podcast listeners, yes. But for us, we've had a lot of stuff going on in and out of the office.
Yeah.
Exciting. So what's everyone been up to?
Well, we finally bought a house and closed on it and
Yay.
moved in. So that was a crazy 30 days
Yeah,
from putting in the offer and closing. So
right.
and
Was it our
moving.
first podcast ever that we were talking about an
Yeah.
offer that you had just put in?
Yep.
Which
Heck, it
wasn't the
was.
house.
Which
but
was not the house. So, but now I live super close to Pablo.
Look at that. All good things come to those who wait.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's how I live right there. Mhm.
What about
Also,
you guys?
I got a puppy.
Yay!
Let's go. Little French bulldog.
Your twin.
Follow me on Instagram. You can see him there. Yeah, my twin. Yeah, we look the same.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
Shameless play. No, I'm just kidding. No, yeah, he's super cute. Great little dog. And so Jenny and I are excited because we've grown up with dogs. And so it's nice to finally have a little guy of our own. So we're excited about it for sure.
Super cute.
He is cute.
What about you?
This first Monday in the office in 3 weeks. So
Yeah.
it actually feels weird.
Does it feel weird?
I've been like in different rooms and
Yeah.
hotels and cities that it was odd. I woke up, I was all fired up, ready to wake up 5:30 in the morning today. And of course, my son decided he thought it would be a good idea to also wake up with me.
Oh.
So completely threw off my whole mentality of trying to get back in the swing of things. So the one good thing about dogs as comparison to
Children.
children is you can like put a dog in a cage and you can't really do it. It's a weird way to start the episode, but just kind of a little bit of
Put
what's,
kids in a cage.
little bit of what's on my mind.
Oh,
Kind of have to
my.
get them.
So sometimes your plans don't always go as planned, but
Hashtag
Good.
parenting skills.
yes,
That's it.
yes.
That's it.
So fun.
What about you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Forgot. You're like asking all the questions. I forgot about you.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been super busy. My nonprofit, Ep.7, we had our first trip. So we were in San Diego.
Whoa.
And I love San Diego.
Everyone does. That's why it's $9,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. 'Cause it's a great city.
It's
Yeah.
so great. It's just, yeah. I love the feel and the weather. It just, sunshine makes you happy. Even when it rained a little bit, it just very quickly got sunny again. And it's, just different, a little different than Pennsylvania.
Yep.
You act like we're so like, what was that accent?
I
What
think
is
it was
that?
like her
What
redneck
is that?
accent.
Yeah.
No.
That's
Like,
what
we
it
are
is.
not-
We're not all like
Like
that.
that?
what in the
Yeah.
world? Everyone, when I tell people we're from Pennsylvania, they think Amish. And
Amish, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they're pretty close by, but
Right.
Not.
it's like not what people think. Everyone I
Yeah.
ever talked to that never been to Pennsylvania doesn't realize like what this place is actually like.
Right. That's
Beautiful.
true.
It's actually a really good place to live. That's close to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so many people think it's like flat. I mean, like rolling hills with like no homes. I'm like,
Corn
No.
for the
Yeah,
Nothing
actually,
like
I've never
that.
really thought about what people think of
It's true.
ask
Pennsylvania.
anyone that's never been there, and they all
Yeah.
have this like
Oh,
weird lot
Oh,
of
I'm
Amish.
so curious.
No, it's true.
If you're watching or listening, I kind of want to know what you think of when you think of Pennsylvania.
And don't Google image and then send us a picture of what it says. Like, what do you think?
What do you
Yeah.
think?
True.
Yeah.
It's a nice place to live. It's a little rainy right now.
Yeah.
Last year has been insane, but what can you do?
We'll take it.
Ready to hop to it?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to lay some groundwork here for today's topic. And then we'll have some fun and some exciting dialogue as we talk about it. But so today's topic is when it's right to be wrong and when to admit it. So we're going to talk about leadership today from a perspective of things change, promises get made. We get a little excited as a new entrepreneur or a new leader. And sometimes we're wrong and it's okay to admit it. So we're going to talk about some of those things. And I listened to a podcast a while back from a leadership guru that I listen to all the time, Craig Groeschel. Does anybody listen to him?
I've heard that.
Yeah, he's got a great podcast. And actually one of his main motto for his podcast that he says every single episode is when the leader gets better, everyone gets better.
Right.
And so I think too, like within our podcast, we're probably going to talk a lot about leadership. And the other day I actually posted on my Instagram just asking people what kind of topics they would like to learn about on the Scaling Creative podcast. And I got a lot of leadership questions. And I got a lot of the same questions too. So I'm excited that people responded. I got about a dozen or so people
It's awesome.
Responding. So I'm excited to really give you guys what you're looking for. But when you start a business or a ministry or a marriage or a new job, you're probably really passionate about what you're doing. But sometimes in the beginning, your passion can be a little bit naive and you tend to speak and act in absolutes, which is not a bad thing because I think sometimes that passion is what attracts people to you. But oftentimes we say like, we will never, or we will always, or I will never, I will always. And while it's important to keep our word, it's just going to happen when you're growing, when you're leading a growing organization, that there will be times when you might need to unmake some promises that you made in the beginning. And so that's why this topic is called When It's Right to Be Wrong. So over time, your perspective will change because over time you change.
Oh, yeah.
Have you guys ever found that? I mean, I think all of us have been leaders, whether it's in ministry or running our own businesses. But have you ever found that you kind of start with this super excitement and you feel like you know exactly what you want and exactly how you're going to do it, and you're never going to do what this person did, and then over time something changes?
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things actually that Craig Groeschel said in the podcast was, he said, you tend to criticize most what you understand the least. And that, it's important to be a student versus a critic. And I got to thinking too, I think sometimes some people are more naturally critical than others based on how we grew up.
Yeah.
I don't know, like just the way that your parents are, you tend to be kind of similar to them. And some people grow up with parents who are more critical than others. And so, yeah, we become kind of like our surroundings. But the area where you're most critical of people or organizations can actually be a little bit of a marker of where you're most vulnerable because you don't have context or necessarily the why behind what they're doing. So I wanted to just think of like giving some examples of maybe how we've had to adjust some things in our life, or early promises we made, or early thoughts that we had, even when it comes to parenting. Like I know, for example, be real with you guys. I remember when I first started taking Malin to school, and I would see some of the mothers getting out of the car, like in pajamas, hair up in a mess. And I'm like, I will never be that mom. And you guys, I'm totally that mom some days. But like you criticize, right, what you don't understand.
Or the kid that has an iPad and you say you never give it to him at dinner, but then they won't shush.
Yep.
And you say, I'll buy you 4 iPads if you just give me 30 minutes to have a dinner by myself. Thank you so much.
Here you go.
I'll surround you with them if you need.
For
With
sure.
LTE so that you can have it in the car as well. Like whatever you need.
Anything you need.
Yeah.
Just
Anybody
kidding, I
else
don't
have
do
like
that.
other examples you can think of when you had to shift, or when you thought you would never do something and then you actually do?
I think it happens all the time as a boss.
Mm.
And I think going back to, I forget how you worded it or how that guy worded it, but it's really easy to critique leadership when you've never been in the position of leadership.
Right.
Like, because it's one thing to be like a leader of people. It's another thing to be a leader of a company. It's another thing to be a leader of a nonprofit. It's like there's so many different things.
It's true.
That I think it's really easy, because when I worked even like full time for a church, or the other times I've worked for people, it's really easy to say you would never do something, or that's a terrible form of leadership, or that's a good form, because it's until you're actually in the situation, I don't think you can actually have true empathy for like,
Right.
why are they that way? You don't really know until you actually are in it. Like it's a very, very difficult thing, I think, for people to actually understand
Right.
until they like are there. And so I think a lot of people have opinions on things. I mean, it's a spot on quote of people criticize what they know the least.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
Absolutely.
And when you lack understanding, you tend to lack compassion.
Yeah.
And when you lack compassion, you won't grow.
I think people that, have the least knowledge of things tend to have the biggest opinions.
Isn't that crazy?
It's just interesting to me. I've always found that. And that people who have the most knowledge about a particular topic or whatever tend to not say anything. You know, they call that consulting and you have to pay them for that. That's, it's interesting. I've just always found that like people who don't know what they're talking about tend to have the biggest opinions. Unfortunately, obviously, on social media, they hide behind a keyboard a lot of the time or whatever,
Right,
but even in person too. And I think it's interesting that I always try to look at people that are very successful in what they do and see how they act, why they act that way. And I've always found that they're very quiet. They listen, but they're very quiet. And I've always kind of wondered why that is. But I think it's because they have some value that unless it's properly asked for, properly needed or whatever, they don't talk unless they're approached or that they need to say what they have to say, I guess.
It's like teenagers when they think they know.
Oh, they know
I think
everything.
they know everything,
Oh, they
right?
know
And you as an adult don't know anything.
Yeah, it's true.
And then you grow up and you realize why your parents did certain things.
Oh, yeah.
Because like you said, it's hard to put yourself in that position. But how, as an employee, how can you put yourself, try to put yourself in that person's shoes? Because that's really hard.
I personally don't think employees can.
I was thinking that same thing. Yeah.
I think all you can do is realize that you can't be in their shoes. And so there are certain things you're going to understand and like, and there are certain things you are not. And at the end of the day, it's you either trust the leader, you trust who they are at the core, you trust certain things, realizing that there's no actual answer you can truly get. Because you can't be in every meeting. You can't see every income and loss and things that a boss has to take ownership of. You can't see every decision. You can't see everything. And the bigger an organization gets, the less and less and less you are actually a part of everyday operations. That I think what happens is, it's even something I think that we're going through even at the size we are, is that there tends to be like you communicate less with a boss or I was part of a church, so it was similar situations where like a lot of people that are part of a small church love how they always had direct access to talk to the pastor because every time everyone could talk to him. You went up, there were 23 people waiting in line. That was it. It was easy.
Right.
Then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they critique and say to themselves, well, it doesn't feel like it's personal anymore. Well, how's it possible that they could keep personal or keep everything? And so it's something that you have to fight as a leader, obviously. But I think there's just a reality that as an employee, you don't know the same struggles that the owner or leader are going through, that you almost have to realize that's just a reality. And you have to either fall under leadership or leave leadership, just knowing that that's part of it.
Right.
And that, I think that's hard, but I don't think it's possible for people to actually know or be able to put them. It's always easy. I know people like you're pretty good at putting yourself in people's shoes, but you can't put yourself in anyone's shoes.
Fully, yeah.
You can somewhat,
right,
and that'll help without question. It's better to at least try, but you can't really. No matter how much I want to fit into a size 13 shoe, I can't really fit in there. It's not. So it's just different, And
I think some people too have like the gift of empathy. I think some people can empathize more than other people. So kind of depending on your gifting in that. But yeah, like as a small church, as a pastor or leader of that church, you might say, I will always stay and talk to every single person, or I will always do this, or I will never do this. And then you get to, you grow and you grow and you grow, and you realize, oh, I might need to change some of those things. And that's kind of what, in this podcast that he was talking about, I thought was such an interesting kind of thought process. So how do you make a change? But you know what, before we get to that, I do want to ask you guys, do you feel like there's a leader in your life, whether it's a parent or a teacher or somebody that you feel like has said certain things like, hey, we're going to do this, and then they've had to switch it and maybe unmake that promise, but they did it well. Can you think of anybody off the top of your head?
Yeah, I had when I was 19 years old, I got the chance to work with these two brothers that were in their 40s. And at the time, they would roughly, I mean, they owned their own business, and they roughly were making like about $250,000 a month. And so when I got to meet them, it was a very different shift in like life. I never understood, like, I didn't even know that existed. Let's put it that way. And but they were very kind, and they were very willing to like teach me a lot of things. And so I got the chance to work with them directly. And I remember them. There was many things I've learned, but one thing I remember them learning, they said that they love to be wrong, because that's when you can actually own something. Because they said that when you're right all the time, you won't learn anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like when you're actually wrong, and he said not to, like, you shouldn't intend to be always wrong. That's not the point. But the point is it's good to be wrong.
Yep.
Because then you can only learn something from that, and you can only take it and then actually own it. And then once you own it, then it's your responsibility, and then you can actually change something from that. So that was something that he said, like, he was actually, like, it's funny you're saying that it's right to be wrong. That was actually something he taught me. It's right to be wrong too, or it's good to be wrong. It's not bad to be wrong. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we all want to be right all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So embracing being wrong, or even just saying, maybe that was right for this season.
Yeah.
But it's wrong now, so we got to switch.
Yeah.
Right.
I think my parents have been very big examples, because I have the unique, because they also were my teachers, because I was homeschooled. So I was with them all the time.
Yeah.
And they really taught us, like, they're very open to us having our own opinions and teaching them and growing all together. And so it's like, and they were fine to admit to us that they were wrong. And even coming to us and asking us to forgive us for something they did wrong, or handled wrong, or got upset with us wrong. I mean, yes, we were disciplined. Yes, we were corrected. But that was huge to me, and especially going into marriage, to know like how you do that and admitting to your wrong, and that asking forgiveness for that was huge. And that humbling as a leader and seeing them do that was really big.
It's good. What about you?
I've had so many people, I think, just growing up in Mary Kay, that I've been able to be mentored by a lot of people. And business has changed so much in that. Like, I've seen products change. I've seen, this whole social media thing change. And so I've experienced a lot of mentors that I've worked with say, okay, so what I've done up until this point, it served me well, but the culture has changed. And so I've seen them make shifts in that and embrace things I didn't necessarily want to embrace, like social media. I have had a lot of mentors who've been in Mary Kay a really long time. They don't really want to do the social media thing, but they're doing it anyways because they know that culture has changed.
I think this kind of goes in line with what Gary says, where he says not to be romantic to a Gary V for people listening. It's not to be romantic to a style of like marketing, but I think this goes with basically everything, because stuff always is going to change anyway. And so I think that kind of in the same type of thought, I think kind of applies here as well.
I think it can be hard too, because if let's say you're an organization of 4 people, 5 people, and as a leader you say, I'll never sway in this specific thing. But then eventually you get to the point where you now have a manager who actually makes that decision.
Right.
Yeah, it's your decision, but at the same time, who's to say that it's not going to naturally, like, did you break your promise? No. Well, maybe. Depends how you look at it, right?
Right.
Perspective.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you didn't break your promise. The problem is you've allowed someone to actually now have that call who's decided to do something differently. And that's why it's just like growth is just a hard thing of any size, whether you grow from whether you go from 1 to 2 or 1,000 to 2,000. I think people just really hate growth, like hate it. I think people want to say they would love to be a part of like a growing organization.
I think they like the idea of it.
Yeah, everyone loves to be a part of a growing organization. Well, because they keep their jobs first of all, but most importantly, and then growth happens, and the things that they were allowed to do, they can't. The things they like that the leader used to always do. Now that's not your direct point of contact. The manager you love is now way above that section, and so you no longer interact with that.
Right.
And the manager you loved lost their job, and now the manager that actually hired you that you loved is not. Like, there's so many parts of it that I think are so difficult.
Right.
And it's just a really, and it doesn't matter like whether you're at management position or employee position. It's just hard when you're dealing with a lot of people.
Right.
Like, it's really hard on all levels because when we have 50 employees, I'll be a boss that has never had 50 employees. When we have 51, I'll be a boss that's never had 51 employees.
Yeah.
Like, everything we're doing, you'll be an employee of someone that has 5 people. So, like, we've all never been through this. We're all trying to navigate it, and then we're all having opinions on something we've never done.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So grace, I think, comes into it. And which is something I feel like people, we don't really talk about
No.
as sometimes when it comes to leadership, this concept of grace. And I think the one promise you can for sure make is that in business, there will always be change.
That's true.
And so, 2 things that I just wanted to say that will maybe help you make change. And the first one is creating a culture that embraces change. So I would recommend for somebody who's maybe starting a business, or like you're in the beginning of your venture or your relationship or your marriage, but just creating that culture that embraces change. And because you can passionately believe something today, but give yourself permission as well to change your mindset when the world kind of changes around you. Now, you want your core values to remain the same. Hopefully those things don't change. But I think a lot of other things around it probably will. But what do you think is maybe different ways that you can create a culture of change?
I was just about to say, I was about to put you on the spot and say, someone's going to ask, well, how do you do that? So you start.
Me start?
Me start.
How do you embrace a culture of change?
I think it's setting up, this is just my opinion, is trying not to talk maybe in absolutes. Like, even I'm thinking about myself and the companies that I've created or the nonprofit that I'm starting, is talking about change maybe more often. And even saying too that the one thing I can guarantee that is constant is change. I don't know. Maybe just an open communication of what changes. And then I am going to talk about the second thing in a second. But does that make sense?
That makes sense. I think also speaking with a language of vision, because if you give people vision, then they have something to want to work for, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so if you're speaking from a place of vision, that means that it's going to be different than what it currently is. Does that make sense? Something's going to happen. But like, I think people work harder when they have like, wow, we're going to get there one day, whatever that may be, you know? And so I think when you speak from that place, yes, it's okay to change, but you also speak from a place of vision, casting vision. Because I think when leaders can cast vision for people, that helps them, like, you know what I mean? Hold on to something. And so I think when you cast vision and speak in that way, you're naturally saying like, hey, it's not going to be the same as it is right now.
Right.
You know what I mean? So maybe that helps too. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is all I think too, I find it so fun to talk about and brainstorm together.
Sure.
But anybody else have any ideas?
I think it's like you need to give grace on both parts. I think the leader needs to give grace to the change that is happening to the employees, and then the employees need to give the leadership grace at the same time, because we all, like, change is hard on both parties. And so there's a lot of grace that needs to happen with that. But I do think with what Paolo was saying, like, I do think a vision, when you have a clear vision and direction that you're going, everybody will be happy to get on that, and they don't mind the change if they know what the end goal is. Because I've worked for a lot of places where the vision changed and the direction changed almost every week. And that was so hard to be a part of, because you got super excited about that vision, and then the next week it was like, well, wait, what were we doing again? Like, it's now over here in this direction. And so, But I think that clear direction for just heading towards it. And there's always course correction. So there's always like with that. But I think I remember reading the book Good to Great, and I think they really talk about that in that book. That I'm trying to remember who wrote it, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. But
We'll put it in the show notes.
yeah, but I think that the one thing I remember them saying is that you want to get everybody on the bus and excited to be on that bus going in that same direction. And so like how companies really did that. So yeah.
And I think what a lot of big companies struggle with though is going from, I'm going to keep talking because I feel like I've seen big level organizations that have told me they struggle with this of it's easy to get a vision on board when everyone's on the same bus, but when you start to need 4 buses to get there,
It's not easy.
how do you tell the other bus what different other, like that's, because
Yeah.
then you start building teams, you start building our vision in technology is more important than your vision here and your vision here. And like it's, it can be difficult.
Yeah.
Or more importantly, when you can't touch every employee with your brain and vision, how do you get them to realize that like the vision still exists when they're not the one managing it, or you know what I mean? Like it's a unique, tricky part about that.
That is.
I had a mentor that once told me, don't do for 1 what you can't do for 100. And I actually didn't like it. Because I thought, well, I have a small team that I'm leading right now. I want to be able to, I know it's like touch but that sounds weird. But like, I want to be able to connect with each person individually. I want to do every single new consultant training myself. I want all the onboarding stuff to be done by me. I want to know their heart and their goals and their And so I didn't listen totally. And so I created that culture of you get me at all times, all day long, you know, and then my team grew to around 100, and I was so burnt out because I was still trying to do what worked for a really small team, and it really was so actually hurt. I'm trying to think of how it hurt my organization for a little while because I had to make a change, and I had to do a lot of training via, you know, Facebook Live and recording videos and sending out training that way. And it took people a really hard time to adjust, and I lost people in the process.
And that's, I think, is a great point to make. I think that as a leader, you could have people that say they embrace change, and then change happens and the people don't embrace it.
Yep.
And you have to realize that there are times that your quote unquote best employee doesn't work for a new culture of what you're doing.
Right.
Regardless of a skill set, which is why I've always thought, and something I've been learning a lot, is like how terrible it is to have like your top employee per se, and I'm doing air quotes for those listening, because if you have one employee who thinks they're irreplaceable, that's how they act. And if one employee is, if you set up a culture of like wanting everyone to keep learning and training and becoming the best so that everyone's so good at everything, then one person doesn't feel like they're the best employee. Because if you ever have a culture where you have a big group of people and one employee leaves and it cripples you, that's horrible leadership.
Exactly.
Because that means you've allowed that person to be the top person.
Right.
And most top people act like top people. Like they show up a little later. They do a little because they're kind of like, there's no way I'm losing my job. They can't do their job without me.
Because some cultures create entitlement.
Yeah.
Which sometimes the scoreboard, I think, can have that effect when you have somebody who's the number one consultant in that, or you know what I mean? Like, and then they feel the sense of entitlement kind of thing. And I think that you can treat every person like they're valuable,
right?
But that they're still responsible,
right?
But that's hard to find that balance, probably.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think without question, I think it's important. Like, it's not that you're trying to make everyone feel like nothing. But at the same time, you also have to set up the culture that like it's a win, and it has to be shown in truth that it's a win if you train someone below you to be better than you.
Yes.
Because naturally, the reason that always happens is because the top employee, if he trains everyone to be as good as they are, well, now they threaten their job. And so if Pablo trains an editor to be unbelievable, the editor becomes really good, and then I fire Pablo, that next person will never train the same way that Pablo did.
Right.
Because they saw what happened, and that's terrible.
Right.
Now, if Pablo trains and trains and trains and trains, gets an editor to become unbelievable, and Pablo still is the one that trains everybody, even though he's not no longer. Now that shows a whole different thing, where they're like, okay, it truly is a win
Yes.
if I equip people.
Yes.
Because I think that's the problem, is everyone's always like, train, train, train. And then they're like, well, that person's half the price. Sorry, you're not like.
Right.
And that's a balance I think companies face. But I think that actually is only shown through actually it happening.
Yes. Agreed.
Like it has to truly be shown that like you now equip this person so well, but you have an even better position than you did, even though someone bypassed you in the skill set that you essentially trained them for.
Right.
And I think that helps to also not have like unicorn employees.
Yeah.
Is if you're always training and your team also is always training because they know it's not threatening, then you build amazing teams.
Right.
Because a new person comes on and everyone's like, can I help?
Yeah.
Rather than
Yeah.
this person knows nothing. They're looking back being like, I learned so much and I should do the same. And
Right.
and that's something I am trying to obviously do, because I know like how far I came from being a person that wanted to learn, and now just trying to do that more and more I think is super helpful for a company.
Absolutely. So the second thing was that I think will help is to talk openly about what promises you need to unmake, and then clearly explain the why behind it. So if as a church, sometimes I think that, if you become this bigger organization, or whatever organization it is, doesn't have to be a church, but if you can kind of talk to your people or your congregation and really talk about how the things that you set up and the promises maybe that you made allowed us to get to this place that we're at right now. And then you can kind of explain the why behind it. So, made promises for all these years, and we've continued that promise. So we've kept that promise, which is why you don't necessarily even have to say, we're going to break the promise. You're just unmaking it and changing it for good reasons. And then, explaining why we need to make the change. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just changing the direction. It's like, we keep using churches, for example, and sorry if you're someone listening that doesn't attend church, that's okay.
Yeah.
Let's just say the church's vision is to reach as many people as possible with what they're teaching. They are going to do it differently with 1,000 people than 10 people.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that the vision changed. It just means, hey, it's always been our goal to do this, and that'll never change. But you know how we used to like do it this way? That doesn't work anymore at this scale. So we have to do it this way. But the vision's not changing. But some people don't like the direction change.
Right.
Because the direction that brought them there, that has to shift to make growth happen, no longer is exciting to certain people. So that's like, you're like always this nonstop back and forth of how to navigate that.
And I do think though, I think that is a natural thing about it is that you will always probably lose somebody in the change. And you have to be okay with that because not everybody is, if it's like a company is going in one direction and they were very passionate about it and then they drop that thing that they're passionate about as they grow, they're going to leave. But it's okay.
Yeah.
Because it's like it helps your company's bigger vision. You can't keep doing that just to keep that one employee.
Yeah.
Or that, so that always is like that is a part of change. Sometimes you do lose people.
Yeah, you can't please everybody.
You can't please everybody.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
When you try to please everybody, you please nobody. That's what I've absolutely realized.
Yeah.
Like not
Is
just
that
here,
a Scott
but
McKenna quote?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. I mean, I just think it's a good quote in general.
Yeah.
Because it's just the truth.
Yeah.
Because the bigger you get in any organization, and any church, and anything, there's more people you're now reaching, and everyone wants to be reached differently.
Yeah.
So if you can just stay focused on your goal, it's similar with YouTube. Like, if I let every negative comment change my direction, well, all the people that were positive, now they're going to become negative.
Yeah.
because I adjusted for the negative.
Right.
And same with if I adjust for just the positive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like, but if I just say, I don't care what you think in either direction, in a good way, as good as possible, then nothing changes the overall direction. And if the direction from leadership doesn't change, it only steers so far off course.
Right.
Rather than being like, we got to make them happy, but now they're really happy this team's good, so we'll go back. Let's make them really happy. And then you keep going back and forth.
Yeah, you become this like pendulum swing. And I think if you know your values and I think it is good to have people above you, mentors that you have that you can, as a leader, come to and say, hey, this is something I'm struggling with my team, or, in marriage, having couples that have really strong marriages. And if you're going through something, you can talk to that person. So I think mentorship and coaching is such a huge part of leading well. And it'll give you the courage to maybe even say, hey, I was wrong in this, and, or whatever it might be, whether it's marriage or kids or, whatever. But so how do you feel like you can apply some of this, what we're talking about, personally and in leadership as well?
I think kind of what you just said into the question before the question, like I think accountability is big in leadership, because I feel like, when you work for someone, you always obviously are accountable to people you work for, or the manager, whatever the structure. And so, but sometimes when you are the leader, maybe you might not be held accountable, maybe, you know what I mean? And so and what I think when a leader is not held accountable, and I've seen it happen in many different organizations. I don't know why we keep coming back to church, but like churches, I've seen it. I've even seen it in like businesses where like there's somebody that's at the top that makes all the things, and there needs to be somebody like that. But it's always good to have somebody who just checks up on that person. You know what I mean? Because they can go rogue then. Like they can do whatever. Like
to me, I mean, I'm definitely learning lots of things. I learned a lot of things this weekend. I learned a lot of things last week. I learned a lot of things when I was gone. I'm realizing just how like interesting it is working with different people, because
what are you trying to say?
it's just like and this is something I feel like I knew a while ago, but I'm realizing is more and more important, of just that it's important for me to realize that people are just different than I am. Meaning, we talked about this last week, but in general, like I'm a person that loves direct feedback. Don't beat around the bush. Don't take a lot of time. Just tell me. Like whether it hurts my feelings or not doesn't matter. I just want you to tell it to me. But it's not right for me as a leader to say, because that's how I like things and how I operate, that's how everyone needs to work with me, regardless whether they operate that way or not. Because that's not good. It's not just because I'm a person that doesn't need you to tell me I'm valued or appreciated doesn't mean that I don't need to show it to people. Just because I'm a person that like is ridiculously overcritical of everything doesn't mean I should go about it the same way with and that's something I think that you don't really realize until you start to lead people, like the importance of that.
Yeah.
Because I'd be the first to tell you that culture is unbelievably important to me, but yet like I wasn't really aware of certain things happening in like even our culture. But it's not me ever changing a vision or who I was. It's me not realizing that the vision was changing how I was actually approaching things. Or not the vision, the growth.
Oh, the growth.
Yeah. Like it's not that it ever changed in my head. It's not that I ever changed in my head.
Right.
The thing is, I've always, what worked for me by myself that might have worked for me and Pablo, maybe, that might not work now, and what might really not work 2 years from now. And it's not okay, like if you went into a new marriage, to say, my love language is this, so yours better be too.
Right.
That doesn't work. We all know that to be true in relationships. Like it does not work if you don't understand what needs to be addressed with them differently.
Right.
And I think that's something that I'm really realizing is way more important than I thought, and that it can't be my way. It can be my way or the highway in a vision per se. Like I'll make the end decision, sure, but that's a terrible way to just like operate everything, because all you're gonna do is make people either feel robotic or make them feel like they have no say, and people always like being a part of a place that they feel like
Yeah.
they have a voice.
I think it's
yeah.
a two-way street, though. Like, I agree totally with what you're saying. I think it's the leader's job to realize those things and then act upon those things. Obviously, hopefully correctly, depending on who the leader is. But I think it's a two-way street. The other way, like I've worked in places, like I've only had a couple of jobs, but I've worked in places where like the employee would say like, oh, that's dumb. I don't know why the manager would. Why would he ever? That's dumb. It worked fine before. And I was like learning a lot at that time. And I'm like, man, you don't even know. You have no idea. Like they have a lot more responsibility. They have 100 employees, you know, here at this freaking supermarket or whatever. And I'm like, they have like overhead and inventory and like HR. There's so much things like that they don't understand. So like I get it too from like an employee standpoint. It's like there's things that like maybe the employees don't understand. And obviously it's the leader's decision on like what they get to know and what they don't know. Obviously, not every employee is going to know everything, but and so that's dependent on that situation. But I think it's important that there's like, kind of like you were saying, there's grace on both sides. That like the leader can come in and say like, hey, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. But and explain those things well. But then also the employee needs to understand. A good employee hopefully would understand that like, okay, they're making this decision. Don't really understand why, but it has to be for some better or higher purpose or reason.
Yeah, it comes down to ultimate trust at the end of the day of leaders.
Both ways, it has to.
When
Yeah.
you do not, when nothing makes sense to you, you have two choices. You either say it makes no sense, but I truly trust.
Right.
There was some thought that went into this, or you say, I don't agree with this whatsoever. And you go elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like
That's true.
that's just really what it comes down to. But it is trust, and trust has to be built.
Right.
So it goes back and forth. Empathy, I think, is a huge thing.
Yeah. I had to learn that even too with when there would be product changes in my company and it was like the best selling product for me. But I also had to understand I don't see all the numbers of what this product does all across the United States. Just because I sell it really well doesn't mean like you kind of have to come to that understanding that
they wouldn't get rid of it if it actually was as good as I thought it was.
Exactly. Yeah. Or there's something better coming and I don't know about what's in production.
Yeah. I can't imagine it was the best seller of the whole company and they removed it.
Yeah.
Because that would not make sense.
But that's sometimes how you feel
right
when this is your market, but you don't see the entire market.
Yeah.
So that's so true as far as trusting. And I think too, in both ways, because I've also experienced bad leadership, unfortunately. And a leader you can't trust is a leader you can't follow.
That's
so there is that, like you build trust and you develop it. And, that's definitely like an important piece of business. Employee to boss and, boss to client, all that. It's so trust is such an important
and I think
piece of the puzzle.
I think it is. I think asking questions isn't bad. Like I'm definitely a person that I'll push back before I say no. You know what I mean? Like if like say somebody came to me and said something like even Scott was like said something like, hey, this is how we're going to do something. Some people are very like, okay, but and then they're in their head like, I don't agree with that at all. I might more, and I kind of decide on like when's the right time to do this. But sometimes I'll be like, why are we doing that? Yeah. Like, I don't really think this, blah, 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 whatever. But then you have to respect where you're at. Cause like I push back once. I don't push back more than that usually, unless it's like a thing, but like most of the time so I think what we're saying is like, you have to trust each other. Of course, I think it's okay to ask questions. That's my point. And maybe question, but obviously discern when's the right time to do that. And then just be respectful of the ultimate decision that's like made. Right. I think it's key to do that, I think.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with like a chain of command too, because if you're part of a huge organization,
that's true.
If Apple decides to change something, like you can't just ask, the CEO what he wants. Like, can I just ask why that's being made? Like, there's a chain of commands.
Yeah, 100%. Right.
And so like you're not even at that point. You're not even like trusting the CEO anymore because you may have never met. People who work for Apple have never met the CEO.
That's true.
You're trusting so many chain of commands up to it, saying that like I don't even know if I can trust the CEO because I don't know him.
Right.
I don't know if I can trust his next manager because I don't know them either.
Right.
I don't even know if I like. Right. So it's hard because you're like trying to be like, do I trust my little manager enough to know that he's trusting the right people?
Right.
So sometimes it's like you just kind of gotta do it and see what happens
That's
too
true.
sometimes.
Right. Yep.
Because it's easy in a small organization
Right.
for Pablo to ask me directly or anyone, like even in 50 people, 100 people organizations. But in some bigger organizations, which might be listening to this, who knows? I know that we can't even really relate to
Right.
what it looks like in that side of it.
Right.
We've
And
we've never been there.
we might be doing things that we're definitely going to have to change
Yeah.
as we grow, you know?
That's a good
And
point.
so, but yeah, I just think sometimes it's right to be wrong and change is just a part of life. So the last couple questions I have are maybe just for you to start thinking about, you know, what should I start doing? And maybe what are some things that I need to change or undo or stop? And in the podcast that I listened to, one of the recommendations he had was sometimes you're too close to see it. And you need to ask people around you. And I've had coaching courses too where I've had to ask people what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are. Because sometimes you don't know when you're so close to something, you don't know. So it's good to ask people around you. There might be things you need to delegate. There might be things you need to stop. There might be things you need to start. And there might be someone you need to empower. So final quote, and this is, again, this is a Craig Groeschel quote. He says, if you're not changing how you think, how you lead, what you do, and what you don't do, your past assumptions will limit your future potential. So that was kind of a profound
There's
thought.
a lot in that one.
Any closing thoughts?
No. I mean, I can speak to people that might be in my position. As I've kind of been processing a lot of this over the last bunch of weeks, but weekend, just that it is important to have people around you, like you said, accountability. But more importantly, not even just accountability as much as like if you are surrounded by people who don't tell you anything, like you're in big trouble, like big trouble. And I think it's really easy as a boss to say you have, I think I just posted is like literally before even a conversation we had last week about like if you have an open door policy but no one walks through it, it's not really very, like there's something wrong.
Right.
Because I think that every boss in the world would be like, you can come to me with anything. But people don't really want to go to the boss very often. And there's what's the reasoning behind that? Like what if you discover something that you never knew, why did you just discover it? It means clearly people didn't trust you like you told them to trust you, but that's your fault, not their fault. They can think whatever I can't ever tell you how you should feel. Like I can't just say it's dumb. Like that's a stupid thought. It's your thought.
Right.
I can't tell you you're wrong if you feel a certain way. But it's so important to realize as a boss, if you're in a position of leadership like that, to realize that like you need to figure out how to actually like keep that at any size, and to actually keep somehow a way that if everyone doesn't have access to you directly, you better have people closest to you that will come to you directly for other people's things. So there's going to constantly be a chain of command.
Yep.
An employee might say something little, but if there's a bunch of employees talking behind management's back, then there's even a problem there, because it means the management's not approachable. And usually it leads from both sides. An unapproachable boss deals with like unapproachable management, which then no one really has feedback. Everyone talks and talks and talks and talks and talks, quits and quits. And you're always blaming the people. Like they weren't suited for this. They weren't this. But maybe it's not always like the employees. Who knows?
That's true.
Remember, I think I said this before. My mom always told me this. Whenever you're pointing at other people, there's always 3 fingers pointing back at you.
Yeah.
So I always try to think about that which, happens in life.
Yeah, I think a lot can be fixed if you look at yourself. I think a lot can be fixed. Not everything, because you can't control people, but you can do a lot with just focusing on what you're doing. And not dwell in it, but definitely look at it.
Yeah, you need people around you that lift up the mirror sometimes.
Yeah, it's true.
Say like, what's staring back at you? But the most important thing too is like, I mean, I know all of us, we care about one another. And I think that's been really apparent lately too, is that we're all individuals, but we care about one another, about where we're going as a team. So
Pretty good looking too.
no, that's my bad angle.
Here
Now
we
you
go.
just told, now you just told everybody.
All right, well, that's a
I
good
know.
place to end.
Yeah. Perfect.
No, your angles. Just kidding. But no, it's okay to be right. No, I messed it up.
You messed up your own thing.
You know what? It is all right to
What
be
is
right.
it? What is this title of this thing even called? It's right
What-
to be.
Yeah, when it's right to be wrong
Yeah.
and when to admit it.
Yep. Now you know.
You know?
Now I
know.
know.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
See you soon.